The classroom buzzed with faint whispers as students hurriedly reviewed their notes, the tension palpable before the big exam. In the far corner of the room, Mia sat quietly, her hands folded over a worn sketchpad. She wasn't like the others, her head wasn't buried in textbooks, and her eyes didn't dart nervously to the clock. Instead, she doodled absent-mindedly, her pencil gliding across the page with ease. It was her usual escape, a world of lines and colors where the judgment of others couldn't reach her. But little did Mia know, her world was about to collide with a force she couldn't avoid, Mrs. Baxter. Mrs. Baxter was the kind of teacher who prided herself on discipline and order. Her classroom was her kingdom, and she ruled it with an iron fist. To her, Mia represented everything she couldn't stand: lack of focus, unconventional thinking, and, worst of all, an air of quiet defiance. Over the years, Mia had become an easy target for Mrs. Baxter's sharp criticisms, earning low marks on papers and tests, often accompanied by a disapproving shake of the teacher's head. The bell rang sharply, signaling the start of the class. Mrs. Baxter strode in, her heels clicking against the tiled floor, her presence commanding silence. Her eyes swept across the room, briefly landing on Mia, who quickly shut her sketchpad and stuffed it into her bag. Mrs. Baxter smirked a tiny, satisfied expression that didn't go unnoticed by the other students. "As you all know," Mrs. Baxter began, her voice clipped and formal, "today's exam will determine your final grade. Some of you have worked diligently, and your efforts will show. Others." Her gaze flickered to Mia, who avoided eye contact, might not be so fortunate. The class exchanged nervous glances, a few stifled chuckles rippling through the room. Mia felt the familiar heat of embarrassment rise to her cheeks but kept her focus on the blank sheet in front of her. The questions stared back at her, mocking her inability to find the answers. Numbers and formulas blurred in her mind, replaced by a swirl of colors and shapes she could sketch effortlessly. But she couldn't draw her way out of this test. Hours later, when the results were posted, Mia's fears were confirmed. Another failing grade. Another red mark on her academic record. Mrs. Baxter didn't hold back her disdain, pulling Mia aside after class to deliver a scathing lecture. "You have so much potential, Mia," she said, her tone laced with sarcasm. "If only you'd spend less time scribbling nonsense and more time studying like everyone else." Mia bit her lip, holding back the words she wanted to say. She didn't bother explaining that art was her passion or that numbers never made sense to her the way sketches did. Mrs. Baxter wouldn't understand, she never had. That evening, Mia retreated to her room, her sanctuary filled with canvases, brushes, and half-finished pieces that reflected her inner world. She picked up her sketchpad and began to draw, the pencil moving faster and faster as tears blurred her vision. She poured all her frustration and pain onto the page, creating something raw and beautiful, something that felt like her truth. The next day, Mia's best friend, Claire, noticed the sketchpad sticking out of her bag. Curious, she flipped through the pages, her eyes widening with awe. "Mia," Claire whispered, her voice barely containing her excitement, "this is incredible. Why don't you show people your work?" "It's just doodles," Mia mumbled, shrugging off the compliment. But Claire wasn't convinced. Later that week, without Mia's knowledge, Claire took a photo of one of Mia's sketches and posted it online. The post started gaining traction immediately. Comments poured in from strangers marveling at the intricacy and emotion in Mia's art. By the next morning, Mia woke up to a flood of notifications. Her work had gone viral. But while the world began to celebrate Mia's talent, Mrs. Baxter remained unimpressed. In her mind, art wasn't a real skill. It certainly wouldn't help Mia pass her exams or succeed in life. What neither of them realized, however, was how quickly things were about to change. Because one of those comments, buried under thousands of others, came from someone who had the power to alter the course of Mia's life forever. And when Mrs. Baxter found out what Mia had been hiding all along, her reaction would be something no one could have predicted. Mia stared at her phone, unable to believe the numbers on the screen. Hundreds of thousands of likes and shares. Messages poured in, filled with encouragement, praise, and questions about her art. At first, she thought it was a mistake, some kind of glitch. But as she scrolled through the flood of comments, it became clear this was real. People from all over the world were connecting with her work in a way she had never imagined. Claire bounced on Mia's bed, grinning from ear to ear. "I told you, Mia. Your art is amazing. Look at all these people who love it." Mia's emotions were a tangled mess of excitement and panic. "You shouldn't have posted it," she said softly, though there wasn't much anger in her voice. "What if someone at school sees it? What if Mrs. Baxter sees it?" Claire rolled her eyes. "Who cares what she thinks? She's just mad because she doesn't understand creativity. And anyway, maybe this is a sign. You've got something special, Mia. People need to see it." Mia wanted to believe Claire. For as long as she could remember, art had been the one thing that made sense to her. It was her language, her escape, her joy. But in Mrs. Baxter's world, art didn't count. It didn't fit into neat rows of answers or equations. And it certainly didn't help on report cards. At school, Mia tried to keep her head down, hoping the buzz around her art wouldn't spill into her everyday life. But Claire's enthusiasm was hard to contain. "Did you see Mia's sketches?" she asked anyone who would listen. "They're going viral. She's a total genius." A few classmates were curious enough to check out the post, and soon, whispers started spreading through the hallways. By lunchtime, it seemed like everyone was talking about Mia's art. "I didn't know you could draw like that," one boy said, holding up his phone with Mia's sketch on the screen. "This is insane." "Yeah, it's like professional level," another girl chimed in. "How did we not know about this?" Mia felt her cheeks flush as more people approached her, asking questions and complimenting her work. It was overwhelming but also strangely exhilarating. For the first time, people were noticing her for something she was proud of. But not everyone was impressed. Mrs. Baxter's sharp voice interrupted the chatter during class. "Settle down, everyone. I don't know what all this fuss is about, but we're here to learn, not to gossip," she said, her eyes narrowing as they landed on Mia. "Some of us could use the extra focus." Mia sank lower in her seat, the weight of Mrs. Baxter's words dragging her excitement back to earth. Even with the attention her art was getting, she still felt like she didn't belong in this world of tests and grades. The next few days were a whirlwind. Mia's sketches continued to gain traction online, and more opportunities started popping up. A local art gallery reached out, asking if Mia would be interested in displaying her work. A popular influencer reposted one of her drawings, adding even more fuel to the fire. Claire was ecstatic. "This is huge, Mia. You're going to be famous." But Mia wasn't so sure. The attention was thrilling, but it also made her feel exposed. What if people stopped liking her work? What if they found out she wasn't as good as they thought? And then there was Mrs. Baxter. The teacher's disdain seemed to grow with every passing day. She gave Mia a failing grade on a group project, claiming she hadn't contributed enough. She dismissed Mia's questions in class with curt responses. And every time someone mentioned Mia's art, Mrs. Baxter's face hardened, as if the very idea of celebrating creativity was an insult to her authority. One afternoon, as Mia packed up her things after class, Mrs. Baxter called her over. "I've heard about your drawings," she said, her tone dripping with disapproval. "It's all anyone seems to talk about these days." Mia braced herself, waiting for the criticism she knew was coming. "But let me be clear," Mrs. Baxter continued, her voice growing colder. "This little hobby of yours won't get you anywhere. Art doesn't pay the bills, Mia. And it certainly won't help you pass this class." Mia swallowed hard, fighting back tears. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she left the classroom in silence, her heart heavy with doubt. That evening, Mia sat in her room, staring at a blank page. For the first time in weeks, the excitement she'd felt about her art was gone. Mrs. Baxter's words echoed in her mind, making her question everything. But then she noticed a new message on her phone. It was from someone she didn't recognize, but the username seemed familiar. When she opened it, her heart skipped a beat. The message was from a renowned artist she had admired for years, someone whose work she had studied and dreamed of emulating. "I saw your sketches," the message read. "You have a rare gift. Let's talk." Mia's mind raced. Could this be real? Was someone like that really interested in her work? But before she could respond, another message came through, this time from Claire. "You won't believe this," Claire wrote, attaching a screenshot. It was a news article featuring Mia's sketches, with the headline, "Teen Artist's Viral Talent Draws Global Attention." Mia's story was spreading faster than she could have imagined. But with every step forward, she felt the weight of Mrs. Baxter's words pulling her back. As the days passed, the tension between Mia's two worlds grew. On one side, there was the overwhelming support from strangers, friends, and even professionals who believed in her talent. On the other, there was the constant pressure from Mrs. Baxter and the academic system that seemed determined to dismiss her passion. Mia knew she couldn't keep living in both worlds forever. Sooner or later, she would have to choose. But what would happen when she did? Would the world she was building online crumble under the weight of her insecurities? Or would she finally find the courage to prove to everyone, including Mrs. Baxter, that her art was more than just a hobby? And as she stared at the message from the artist, still unanswered on her screen, Mia realized one thing: her story was only just beginning. Mia couldn't shake the feeling that she was living two separate lives. At school, she remained the quiet, awkward girl who always felt out of place. Mrs. Baxter's icy stares and sharp remarks seemed more pointed than ever, as though she was determined to remind Mia of her place. But outside of school, Mia's world was exploding. Her art was no longer just a personal escape, it had become a phenomenon. More opportunities began to flood her inbox: collaboration requests, interviews, and even offers to create custom pieces for celebrities. Mia couldn't believe it. It felt like a dream, but it was also overwhelming. She'd barely slept in days, juggling the growing demands of her newfound popularity with the constant stress of school. Claire noticed how worn out Mia looked one morning and nudged her in the cafeteria. "You okay?" she asked, lowering her voice so no one else could hear. "I don't know," Mia admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's just a lot. And Mrs. Baxter. I feel like she's watching me more than ever, waiting for me to mess up." "Forget her," Claire said firmly. "You're doing something amazing, Mia. Don't let her take that away from you." But it wasn't that simple. The more attention Mia's art received, the harder it became to keep it a secret from the school. By now, nearly everyone knew about it, and whispers followed her wherever she went. Some students were supportive, but others weren't. A group of kids snickered as Mia walked by, one of them muttering, "Guess she thinks she's too good for the rest of us now." Mia tried to ignore them, but the comments stung. She never wanted to make anyone feel like she thought she was better than them. She just wanted to do what she loved. Things came to a head one afternoon when Mrs. Baxter announced a pop quiz. The questions were impossibly difficult for Mia, who felt the weight of Mrs. Baxter's gaze as she struggled through the test. After class, Mrs. Baxter called her over, waving Mia's quiz in the air. "Another failing grade," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "You're not even trying, are you?" "I am," Mia said softly, though her hands trembled. "I'm just better at other things." "Other things," Mrs. Baxter repeated with a bitter laugh. "You mean those little doodles of yours? Let me give you some advice, Mia. The real world doesn't care about your art. You'll see that soon enough." Mia clenched her fists, the frustration boiling inside her. She wanted to scream, to tell Mrs. Baxter how wrong she was, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she walked out of the classroom, tears stinging her eyes. That night, Mia sat in her room, staring at her latest sketch. It was a half-finished piece, something she'd been working on for days but couldn't bring herself to complete. Her phone buzzed with notifications, more messages, more opportunities, but she couldn't focus. Mrs. Baxter's words echoed in her mind, drowning out the praise from strangers. As she sat there, torn between the two worlds pulling her in opposite directions, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from the renowned artist who had reached out before. "I'm in town for a few days," the message read. "I'd love to meet you and talk about your work. Let me know if you're interested." Mia stared at the screen, her heart pounding. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but the thought of meeting someone so accomplished filled her with doubt. What if they realized she wasn't good enough? What if it was all a mistake? The next day, Claire practically dragged Mia out of her slump. "You have to meet them," she insisted. "This could change everything." Mia nodded, though the knot in her stomach only grew tighter. She decided to go, but the anxiety was almost unbearable. On the day of the meeting, she could barely eat or think straight. The artist turned out to be kind and down to earth, their passion for art evident in every word. They praised Mia's work, calling it raw and full of emotion, but they also asked her tough questions. "What do you want to do with your talent?" they asked. "Have you thought about how far you want to take this?" Mia hesitated. She wanted to say she dreamed of being an artist full-time, of sharing her work with the world. But she could still hear Mrs. Baxter's voice in her head, telling her it wasn't practical, that it didn't matter. I don't know," she admitted. The artist gave her a reassuring smile. "You don't have to have it all figured out right now. But don't let anyone convince you that your talent isn't worth pursuing. People like that. They don't see the bigger picture." Mia left the meeting feeling inspired but also conflicted. She knew she had something special, but how could she convince the people around her, especially Mrs. Baxter, that it was worth fighting for? The tipping point came a few days later during a school assembly. Unbeknownst to Mia, Claire had submitted one of her sketches to a local art competition, and it had won first place. The principal announced the news in front of the entire school, showing Mia's work on a large screen. The audience erupted in applause, but Mia froze in her seat. Her secret was out now, there was no hiding it anymore. She glanced over at Mrs. Baxter, whose expression was unreadable. As the applause died down, the principal invited Mia to the stage to say a few words. Heart-pounding, Mia stood and made her way to the microphone. But before she could speak, Mrs. Baxter rose from her seat, her voice cutting through the auditorium like a knife. "This is ridiculous," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We're here to celebrate academics, not some frivolous hobby." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Mia. Her hands shook as she gripped the microphone, unsure of what to say. She could feel the weight of everyone's expectations, the pressure to stand up for herself and her art. This was her moment. But could she rise to the challenge? Or would Mrs. Baxter's words silence her once and for all? Mia stood frozen on the stage, the microphone gripped tightly in her trembling hands. The entire auditorium seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see how she would respond. Mrs. Baxter's words echoed in the silence, cutting through Mia's confidence like a blade. She glanced at the audience, catching sight of Claire's wide-eyed, encouraging look from the front row. Her heart pounded in her chest, louder than the silence around her. For a moment, Mia considered walking off the stage. It would be easier to avoid the confrontation, to retreat to the safety of her sketchpad and her room. But something deep inside her, the part of her that had drawn through sleepless nights, that had poured her soul into every line and shade, refused to let her back down. Taking a deep breath, Mia stepped closer to the microphone. Her voice wavered at first but grew steadier with each word. "I know not everyone understands why art matters," she said, her eyes darting to Mrs. Baxter's stern face. "But for me, it's everything. It's how I make sense of the world, how I connect with people. And just because it's different doesn't mean it's not important." The audience broke into applause, and Mia felt a surge of relief and pride. But Mrs. Baxter remained seated, her expression icy and unyielding. As the applause faded, she stood and addressed the room, her voice dripping with authority. "Let's not confuse fleeting attention with true achievement," Mrs. Baxter said. "Real success comes from discipline, hard work, and measurable results. Art may be a nice hobby, but it doesn't prepare you for the realities of life. The tension in the room was suffocating. Mia wanted to respond, to defend herself, but her voice caught in her throat. Just as she was about to step away from the microphone, another voice rang out. "With all due respect, Mrs. Baxter, you're wrong." The crowd turned to see who had spoken. To Mia's shock, it was the principal. He rose from his seat, his tone calm but firm. "Art isn't just a hobby. It's a form of communication, a way to inspire and bring people together. Mia's work has already reached thousands of people, which is more than most of us can say. That's something to celebrate, not dismiss." The room erupted in applause again, this time louder and more enthusiastic. Mrs. Baxter's face tightened, but she said nothing, her lips pressed into a thin line. Mia felt a swell of gratitude toward the principal, but the conflict with Mrs. Baxter wasn't over. The teacher's disapproval continued to loom over her, a constant reminder of the uphill battle she faced. Later that day, Mia returned to her locker, her thoughts still racing. She was startled to find a note tucked into the slats. Unfolding it, she read the words written in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. "Meet me in the art room after school. There's something you need to see." Her stomach churned with nerves and curiosity. She glanced around, wondering who had left the note, but the hallway was empty. After the final bell rang, Mia hesitated before heading to the art room. It was a place she rarely visited, given how little art was valued at her school. But as she pushed open the door, her breath caught. The room was filled with dozens of drawings, paintings, and sculptures, each one bold, expressive, and beautiful. At the center of the room stood a woman she didn't recognize, her arms crossed and a warm smile on her face. "You must be Mia," the woman said. "I've heard a lot about you." Mia blinked in surprise. "Who are you?" "I'm Ms. Rivera," the woman replied. "I'm the new art teacher." Mia felt a spark of hope. "I didn't know we had an art program." "We don't," Ms. Rivera admitted, her expression turning serious. "Not yet. But I've been fighting to change that. And when I saw your work online, I knew I had to meet you. Your talent is exactly the kind of thing I want to showcase." Mia's heart raced as Ms. Rivera explained her plan to create a dedicated art program at the school. But there was a catch: it required approval from the school board, and not everyone was on board. "Mrs. Baxter has been one of the biggest opponents," Ms. Rivera said. "She thinks art is a distraction, that it takes away from academics. But if we can show the board how much support there is for this, we might be able to change their minds." Mia's excitement was quickly tempered by doubt. She had already faced so much resistance from Mrs. Baxter. Could she really take on something this big? Ms. Rivera seemed to sense her hesitation. "I know it's a lot to ask, but I believe in you, Mia. Your art has already inspired so many people. Imagine what we could do if we had the resources to support students like you." The weight of the decision pressed down on Mia. This wasn't just about her anymore, it was about creating something bigger than herself. But the thought of going head-to-head with Mrs. Baxter and the school board was daunting. As Mia walked home that evening, her mind was a whirlwind of possibilities and fears. She thought about the message from the renowned artist, the encouragement from Claire and the principal, and the unwavering belief of Ms. Rivera. And then she thought about Mrs. Baxter, her relentless criticism, and the power she held over Mia's future. For the first time, Mia realized she wasn't just fighting for her art. She was fighting to prove that creativity and passion had a place in the world no matter what anyone said. But as the day of the school board meeting approached, Mia received an unexpected message that changed everything. It was from an anonymous account, with only a single line. "Be careful who you trust." The stakes had never been higher, and now, Mia wasn't sure who was on her side. The days leading up to the school board meeting felt like a blur. Mia worked tirelessly with Ms. Rivera to prepare a presentation that showcased the importance of art in schools. They gathered testimonials from students, examples of Mia's work, and even statistics about how art could improve academic performance and mental health. Claire was by Mia's side every step of the way, helping her rehearse her speech and keeping her spirits up when the pressure felt overwhelming. But the anonymous message lingered in Mia's mind, casting a shadow over everything. She tried to brush it off as a prank, but a part of her couldn't shake the feeling that someone was trying to warn her. The thought made her second-guess every interaction, every decision. Even Ms. Rivera's enthusiasm began to feel suspicious, though Mia hated herself for thinking that way. When the day of the meeting arrived, the auditorium was packed. Teachers, students, parents, and even local news reporters had shown up. Mia felt a lump in her throat as she walked to the front of the room, her sketchbook tucked under her arm like a shield. The school board members sat at a long table, their expressions unreadable. Mrs. Baxter was seated off to the side, her arms crossed and her face set in a stern frown. Ms. Rivera opened the presentation with a passionate speech about the value of art education. She spoke about creativity, self-expression, and the countless ways art could enrich students' lives. The audience applauded, but the school board members remained stoic. Then it was Mia's turn. Her palms were sweaty as she stepped up to the podium. She glanced at Claire, who gave her a reassuring nod, and took a deep breath. "I know some people think art doesn't matter," Mia began, her voice trembling but steady. "That it's just a hobby or a distraction. But for me, art has been a lifeline. It's helped me through some of the hardest times in my life. And I know I'm not the only one." She held up her sketchbook and flipped through the pages, showing the audience her work. The room was silent as she spoke about how each piece had been inspired by her struggles, her dreams, and the world around her. As she finished her speech, the room erupted into applause. But before the school board could respond, Mrs. Baxter stood and addressed them. "Let's not get carried away," she said, her voice cold and commanding. "This is a school, not an art gallery. Our priority should be academics, not pandering to individual interests." The room fell quiet, and Mia felt her heart sink. But before she could respond, a man in the audience stood up. "I think we need to hear the whole story," he said, his voice firm. "Including Mrs. Baxter's role in all of this." The man introduced himself as a former student who had also struggled under Mrs. Baxter's strict and dismissive teaching style. He shared how her negativity had nearly crushed his confidence and how he'd only rediscovered his passion for learning after leaving her class. The room buzzed with murmurs as more people began to speak up: parents, students, even other teachers. They shared stories of how Mrs. Baxter's rigid approach had stifled creativity and discouraged students. Mrs. Baxter's face turned red, and she tried to defend herself, but the tide had turned. The school board members exchanged glances, clearly rethinking their stance. Just as it seemed like the meeting might end on a positive note, a voice from the back of the room cut through the noise. "I have something to add," the voice said. The crowd parted to reveal a young woman holding a folder. She walked to the front and handed the folder to the school board. "This is proof that Mia's work has been plagiarized." Gasps filled the room as Mia's heart dropped. She stepped forward, her voice shaking. "That's not true. I've created everything myself." The woman smirked. "Then how do you explain this?" She projected an image onto the screen, showing a piece of art that looked strikingly similar to Mia's but with a different signature. Mia's mind raced. She knew the piece wasn't hers, but it looked like someone had copied her style. The school board members exchanged skeptical looks, and Mia felt the ground slipping out from under her. But then Claire stood up, her voice filled with determination. "This is a setup," she said. "Mia's work is real. Someone's trying to sabotage her." The room erupted into chaos as accusations flew. Ms. Rivera quickly stepped in, urging the school board to investigate the claim before jumping to conclusions. As the meeting adjourned, Mia felt a mix of relief and dread. The school board agreed to postpone their decision until the issue was resolved, but the damage had been done. That night, Mia received a message from the same anonymous account. "Not everyone wants to see you succeed. Be careful." The words sent a chill down her spine. She didn't know who to trust anymore, but one thing was clear: the fight wasn't over yet. The days after the school board meeting were some of the longest of Mia's life. Whispers followed her through the hallways, a mix of curiosity and judgment. The accusation of plagiarism cast a shadow over everything, and though Claire and Ms. Rivera tried their best to keep her spirits up, Mia couldn't shake the feeling of doubt creeping in. The anonymous messages didn't stop, either. Each one was vague but unsettling, as if someone was watching her every move. Ms. Rivera was determined to clear Mia's name. She spent hours combing through Mia's old sketchbooks, social media posts, and even timestamps on her digital files to gather proof that her work was original. "Don't let them get to you," Ms. Rivera said one evening as they sat in the art room surrounded by Mia's drawings. "You know the truth, and the evidence will speak for itself." Mia nodded, but the stress was wearing her down. The idea that someone had gone to such lengths to discredit her was terrifying. She couldn't help but wonder who would do this. Was it Mrs. Baxter? A jealous classmate? Or someone else entirely? The not knowing was the worst part. Then, a breakthrough came. Ms. Rivera discovered that the supposedly plagiarized piece had been uploaded online after Mia's original work had gone viral. She presented the evidence to the school board, showing clear timestamps that proved Mia's authenticity. The board was impressed, and the case against Mia began to unravel. But the real twist came when Claire, ever the detective, decided to dig deeper into the anonymous messages. She traced the account to a student in their school, someone Mia had barely spoken to but had apparently harbored a grudge against her success. When confronted, the student admitted to faking the plagiarism claim out of jealousy. "I didn't think it would go this far," they said, their voice shaking. I wanted people to notice me." The confession was both infuriating and heartbreaking. Mia felt a wave of emotions: anger, relief, and even a pang of sympathy. She knew what it was like to feel invisible, but she couldn't excuse what had been done to her. The school board reprimanded the student, and the plagiarism claim was officially dismissed. Mia's name was cleared. With the controversy behind her, Mia found herself at the center of a whirlwind of support. The school board not only approved the art program but also offered Mia a scholarship to pursue her passion after graduation. Local news outlets picked up her story, and she became a symbol of resilience and creativity. Even students who had once ignored her started to approach her with words of encouragement and admiration. Mrs. Baxter, however, remained a looming figure in Mia's life. Though she never apologized directly, her demeanor toward Mia softened in the weeks that followed. She no longer singled Mia out in class, and her criticisms grew less sharp. It wasn't exactly redemption, but it was a start. On the day the new art program officially launched, Mia stood in front of a crowd in the same auditorium where everything had nearly fallen apart. This time, she wasn't nervous. She spoke confidently about the power of art and the importance of believing in yourself, even when others doubt you. The audience gave her a standing ovation, and for the first time, Mia felt like she truly belonged. As the event ended, Ms. Rivera pulled Mia aside. "You've done something incredible," she said. "Not just for yourself, but for everyone who's ever felt like their voice didn't matter." Mia smiled, her heart full. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said. "Or Claire. Or everyone who believed in me." That evening, as Mia walked home, she thought about everything that had happened: the pain, the fear, the triumphs. She realized that her journey wasn't just about proving Mrs. Baxter wrong or clearing her name. It was about discovering her own strength and the value of her voice. The anonymous messages, the sabotage, even the criticism, they had all pushed her to grow in ways she never thought possible. Back in her room, Mia picked up her sketchbook and began to draw. This time, she didn't feel the need to hide her work or worry about what others might think. She drew for herself, for the joy of it, and for the countless possibilities that lay ahead. As the final lines took shape on the page, Mia knew this was just the beginning. Her story wasn't about being a victim or even a hero, it was about being herself, unapologetically, and inspiring others to do the same. And that, she realized, was the most powerful thing of all.